Alright everyone, welcome back. Now in this lecture we are going to talk about how we can implement the basic login functionality within Laravel. So since we have covered the create account and account verification, we now need to basically check if how we can use login functionality to log in the user into our dashboard pages. So if you see that within our web.php, I have created this login page, the home page, which is protected by the auth middleware. So now if I try to navigate to that, that does not work. Okay. So what I need is basically I need to log into the basically this account of the user. So let's get started with that. We have this login route defined here. So let's first of all create a new route endpoint, and that will basically point to the login controller, and I will create a new function of authenticate and just give the name of authentication as well. Now within our login controller we need to define a function of authenticate, and we actually need to remove everything from here. Okay, so what we need is basically first of all in our login controller we have email. So we are going to log in the user by let's say what do we have? We have the email of the user, and I think we also have the username. um I just forgot. Okay, so we do have the username as well, but let's use the username of the user to log in, and we are going to set this to text since this is a username. So that should be text. Email should be replaced by username, and finally the username. Okay, so we definitely also have password, so we also need to set the old value for our username input field, and for password we will let the password as it is, but make sure that you do have the password name set here. And also additionally we also need the type of checkbox, and it should be name of remember me, and the value should be 1. Okay, and this should be default, it should be checked. So let actually check it by default. All right, and finally we also need to change the action here. So route, it will point to our authentication route, and lastly we also need to use the CSRF token. Okay, if I now reload the page, I should see username, password, and everything is working. So what we need first of all, we need to basically create a function, the class. So PHP artisan make request login form request. Okay, so we will make sure that the data is basically validated before we actually send that data into our database. So we can set this to true, and we can also pass the rules here. So our first rule would be username, and definitely that would be required. It should be string and maximum of 258 characters. All right, and then we also need the password, so required, and we also need to set the minimum password to 8 because we have set the password minimum characters to 8, so we also need the minimum characters of 8 to log in to the system. Okay, and finally we that's it. And what now we need is basically we need to use the try catch block. So I definitely use try catch in every database interaction. So where we have the other exception, so this is query exception. Now the reason of that is basically I want to make sure that everything is aligned properly. So since we are not going to make any sort of transaction, we will not use db transaction because that is not required here. Okay, so let's use, or maybe actually let's create a class which is service class. So php artisan make class services, and that should be login service. And let's also use that, so public function underscore construct, and this should be login service. And finally create a protected object of service, and $this service equals to instead of login service, just name it as service. Now let's try to authenticate the user. There are basically two ways. Either we can go for this login method here, and then we can check if the user is authenticated. We can redirect the user back, or else we can basically return the user false. Okay, so let's use $this service authenticate, and this will definitely have a function of authentication. So let's replace this construct function and also pass the request. So let's grab the username. So $request string username. We can also use input here, but I would like to go for the string. Then similarly, we can also do the same process of password, and we can use that for password as well. And lastly, we need remember me. Okay, so this would be definitely so this also is a string as well, since we are storing the value as a string. So let's get the name and paste it here. Okay, so now what we need is basically return auth attempt, like so. Okay, so we are going to return this one, so this will definitely return a boolean. So what we are doing is basically we are trying to check if the username is this one and the password is this one. Okay, so if this is basically like correct, then it will automatically log in the user. So what we need is basically we need to return it, and then here we can check is logged or maybe is authenticated, like so. So here what we can do is basically if is authenticated, then let's say route to dashboard, like so. Else we can redirect back to login page with, and then in this with we can say invalid username or password. Okay, so else if there is any sort of error, then redirect back to login page with error, and that is basically get the error message. And definitely we also need to log the warning. So what we have is error. Yeah, so we need to use this e here. Okay, now let's try to see how things gonna work. Let me also see if we have validation included. No. So what we need is basically we need to use these validation errors as well. So let's close our register service things because we have completed those options. And we have also completed this email verification as well. Okay, so let's use that here. So where should we use it? Maybe this one on this section. So let's include it here. All right. So let's refresh the page and try to sign in. Okay, so it says that the username field is required. Okay, it says username field is required. What do we have? Okay, so we do not have a name field here. Sorry, we do have, and it is text. It should be username. So reload the page one more time, submit, and it says invalid username or password. Definitely because these values does not exist. So let's create an account and try to log in with that. So I will fake fill the data here, and we need to use the username. So let's use the username and try to sign in. Okay, now we are signed in and we are authenticated. Now if I try to reload the page, I am on the home page. If I try to go back, I should definitely be redirected to login page, and that's really working perfectly. Now the other reason is that it is working is because this is also verified. Now let's try to log out our user and try to log in the user with where the email verification is not authenticated, so the user email is not verified. So let's use those options, and username is this one, sign in. Now you can see we are now logged in, but this redirected us back to our this email verification method. And no matter what, if I try to go to home page, every time this will redirect me here. Even if I try to go back to the login page, this will not work. That is basically really working fine. If I try to log out, again, it is not working because user has to verify the email address. All right, so now if I just try to send the verification email, let that work. And let's also open the mail trap as well. Let's go to the account of Mailtrap, inboxes. I think the email is not yet sent. Let's wait for it. Okay, so it is now sent. We have received it. Now verify the email address. Now it is verified. Now if I try to reload, I am now back to home page. Now if I try to go back, definitely this will redirect me back to home page. And if I try to log out, this works. Okay, so let's also do one last thing. So here you can see we have the email verification method and the active is also set to 1. One last thing what I want to do is basically, if you remember, we have also used this active column as well. Okay, so what I also want to append this column or where condition is basically where this active is also 1. If it is not 1, the user must not be able to log in. So in this scenario, let's try to put this to 0. And since this account is verified, but the user status is not active. So now if I try to log in, so it should not let me log in, and you can see it is basically not letting me log in. Even though if I remove this option, let's remove this option and try to log in again. So here you can see I am now logged in, but my account is basically not active. So I need to make sure that the user does not gets logged in if the account is inactive. All right. So one more thing I am checking here is basically when we are redirecting the user back with these options, we also need to return with input. Okay. So in that way, the old values for our username will also be filled. So if I now try to reload the page and use this username, sign in, and now you can see that this username still exists here. All right, so that's it for this lecture. We have learned how we can do the login programmatically. In the next lecture, we will talk about the forgot password method. That's it, and I will see you in the next one.